Story number 3. So, okay, we found SDKs, we found a soundboard app that turned out to be bad. Are there any things that are just, somebody might install on my phone and do bad stuff to me? And so we said, okay, let's dial up our heuristics and find applications that are accessing a ton of data.
What app accesses every permission?
So we found a lot of applications in the market that are called system utilities, and that's literally the text and nothing more, from a developer called RxS. The application names sound like workout plans, Android 15x, Android 16x. And we see inside something shuttling code to mobilespylogs.com. And yeah. I don't know about you, whenever I see anything going to that URL, I get a little scared. So, okay, we dug in. Here's our friend Box Molly. What happened? Get SMS details, get contact details, get URL details, get call contacts. Now, that's a lot of data. Oh, what else is happening? Oh, this is mobilespylogs.com. It's a well-known purveyor of mobile espionage applications. And what they do is, in order to install it on somebody's device, so jealous ex-girlfriend or something to that effect, they basically say, hey, go in the market, search for these kind of cryptic names, and install that on somebody's device. And to be clear, this is not something that you are likely going to install yourself, but these things are in the market, and they're called system utilities. So if this is on your phone, you don't really have much recourse into knowing what it actually is. Another example on iPhone, Nicholas at Black Hat DC had a really great talk. He talked about a spy phone application, and it gathered a whole bunch of applications, or a whole bunch of data on iPhone using allowed APIs. And the interesting thing on iPhone is, on Android you see the permissions that an application is accessing, but on iPhone you get the app or you don't. You can see location and push, but that's about it.
I thought the keyboard cache was one of the coolest parts of that research.
Yeah, it was great. So the talk's available online. I highly recommend checking it out, and the code's on GitHub, so you can check that out too. Also, I don't know if any of you guys saw last week, there was a 15-year-old developer, literally a 15-year-old, that snuck a flashlight app into the iPhone market with a functional socks proxy. Effectively, this turned it into a tethering application. This was accepted into the App Store, and once the internet's found it, Apple removed it.
And just to be clear, this is not malicious, but in terms of the notion that just because something is curated or looked at, the idea of something not being able to make it in, this is a perfect example. A flashlight app with advanced code and functionality made it through. Potentially millions of people could have downloaded this thing.
So the lesson to be learned here is apps aren't always upfront about what they do. It's up to the user to kind of understand and be a savvy consumer about applications. Story number 4, the orange wallpaper. So we looked at a whole bunch of permissions, but what about kind of more seemingly innocuous things? Your IMEI, your IMSI, your phone number. And there are actually only a few hundred applications in the Android market that gather this sort of data. And we originally diced this data and said, are there any patterns? And we found there were 2 developers that actually had a near majority of the applications in the market that accessed all these capabilities. And so let's dig in. What did we find? These are the applications from these 2 developers.
So wait, so guess which one is the most popular?
So let's download one of these applications. I want to pimp my phone. So we search for a wallpaper once we've downloaded the app. Select a wallpaper. Phone is pimped. Wait, so why again are the wallpaper applications accessing my phone number, IMSI, and IMEI? Okay, so good friend Wireshark, and none of you can read this. But this is what happened. We installed the wallpaper app, ponies. Then we saw this HTTP request in the clear being sent to a server. My SIM serial number, my subscriber ID, my phone number, and my voicemail number.
In the clear.
In the clear. Wait, why do they need my voicemail number? Oh, and the interesting thing is, on some Android phones, you can actually insert your password into the default voicemail number. Pause 1337. That's not my actual voicemail number.
And so you don't have
to... Yeah, I'll change it after this talk. So let's dig in. We did some disassembly on the application, and we actually found that nearly all of these applications had the same class. And the great thing about these kind of app genome projects, we can ask this question fairly easily. We don't actually have to go dig in and manually reverse engineer every application. We just said, oh, yep, they all have this thing in common. That's kind of weird. So what does this service do? Here's an excerpt from the disassembly of what actually happened. See device ID, get line 911 number, SIM serial number, subscriber ID, get voicemail number. I mean, these are all the Android APIs that access the data we just saw. So who owns the domain that the data was being sent to? Yeah. But of course, nobody would ever download an application and agree to permissions without looking, right? Nobody's ever done that. Any guess as to how many downloads these applications had?
Yeah, and so just to be clear, when we look at this app, and you can kick to the next slide, the information being collected isn't necessarily malicious, but you have to ask yourself, do users actually understand that when they're downloading a wallpaper application, that their phone number, their voicemail number, and potentially their password, their IMEI and IMZ number, which can be used to get course location, is being recorded? I think not. And this is just a really good example. Like, our goal here is to help developers understand that even if this isn't malicious, you're potentially compromising the privacy of your users. Think about this. If you're at a coffee shop and you're on a Wi-Fi hotspot with your Droid, for example, all this information is being sent in the clear. If you did this at DEFCON, your IMZ, all this stuff would be up on the wall of sheep. I mean, it's ridiculous.
And so the claim from the developer is that the phone number was being collected to preserve favorites across devices. So if you uninstall the wallpaper app, you throw your phone away and get a new phone, it will preserve that favorite. Google is investigating the apps right now. They're taken down from the market until they reach a decision. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this. So what's the lesson here? Is applications, if they have capabilities, if they request permissions, as a user, you should assume they're actually accessing them. So summary of the lessons we learned today, just so if you guys take something home. First, I really want to underscore that simply if an app accesses sensitive data, it doesn't mean it's bad, right? There are totally legitimate reasons, and actually that's the power of mobile operating systems, that we can access this sensitive data. We can have powerful apps, and it's an interesting question as to whether a given access to sensitive data is something you as a user want or not. Secondarily, developers, if you're in the audience, you may not always know what's in your apps. Please pay attention and only put things that you actually want in there. Third, applications, they're not always upfront about what they do, and so one of the goals of the project is to basically extract what applications are actually doing and help users understand, what's actually going on under the hood. And third, be careful what you download. Applications, Android is a great example. You can actually see what an application is doing, so just look at that and assume that if an application accesses something, it's for a reason, and it's up to you as a user to choose whether you accept that reason or not.
Right, so just imagine what's in the wild. So hypothetically, just the power of this project, as Kevin talked about, is we have a vulnerability. We now have the ability to ask a question about all the apps in the marketplace and say, is this code existent in other places? Is this type of capability existent in other places? And being able to instantly find this. So when Kevin and I initially were looking at this stuff, we saw the one wallpaper app and we said, oh, 50,000 people had downloaded this. This looks interesting. The way we were able to see that it was, 76 plus 8 apps in total, and between 1.1 and 4.6 million downloads, was because of the App Genome Project and the ability to then say, okay, this one piece of data we found, how do we look at all of the data and the mobile app environment? And we think this is going to be the beginning of some really advanced new security response tools. Yeah, I mean, if you ask how you would know how many applications on Windows would access a given vulnerability, it's almost impossible. So we're just about finished here. I think it's three things that are really important. Application models are probably going to remove all really bad apps from the market. But as we've seen with a lot of apps we've talked about today, there's context dependence. It's hard to say whether something's good or bad, especially if it looks good today and maybe you get a whole bunch of people to download it and then it turns bad later. For example, if it updates, imagine easiest way to get malware on 1 million phones is to release a game for free, get 1 million people to download it, then update it with some bad code, or flip a bit on the server and execute code dynamically. And these are going to be some really interesting problems we have to deal with app stores. And just a final point, I mean, the future of mobile security is not going to be PC-like viruses. It is going to be in this gray area, and we're going to be seeing more and more of this. So pay attention to what you download. Developers, be responsible about how you're developing your apps, and administrators, don't feel like you have to ban apps. Just make sure your users know what is happening in the context of their mobile experience.
So we wanted to thank everyone.
And thanks to Google.